Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Werman. I'm back with another installment in the Amazing Women of History series of audio things I'm doing. I wanted to share with you today one that really frustrated me when I read this entry into this book I have about the 52 women who changed science and the world. Her name is Rosalind Franklin, and I knew the story a little bit about her, but the details that are offered in this little clip really made me frustrated on her behalf, so I want to share it with you. She's British. She works in the field of genetics, or worked, excuse me. She lived from 1920 to 1958. The discussion of Rosalind Franklin's life and work often rotates about one impossible question. Had she not died of ovarian cancer at the age of 37, would she have shared the 1962 Nobel Prize with James Watson and Francis Crick? The answer is probably not. The conclusion stings because there was some definite wrongdoing. In Watson's best-selling book, The Double Helix, which recounts his and Crick's discovery of DNA, Watson caricatured Franklin quite cruelly. She was Rosie, a name she did not like, who, quote, might have been stunning had she taken even a mild interest in clothes, end quote. Rosie, who was curt and reactive and caused everyone working with her misery. Rosie, who could not possibly be considered serious competition in the quest to nail down the structure of DNA. Because she had been dead for a decade when the Double Helix was published, others spoke for her. It was, quote, a mean book, according to the Nobel Prize winning geneticist Barbara McClintock. Another geneticist, Robert L. Sinsenheimer, called Watson's portrait of Franklin, quote, unbelievably mean in spirit, filled with the distorted and cruel perceptions of childish insecurity. Anne Sayre, a friend and Franklin biographer, complained that Watson had, quote, carelessly robbed Rosalind of her personality. Watson's portrayal of Franklin, however, was made worse by this cavalier disclosure. Rosie, quote, did not directly give us her data, close quote. And there it was, a stunning admission hidden between chapters of gloating. When others tugged on the dangling thread, the portrayal of Franklin began to unravel. Watson may have found her somewhat unpleasant to work with, but his experience was by no means universal. She was a competitor and far ahead of Watson and Crick during much of the search for DNA. The rival pair simply wouldn't have made their discovery when they did, had it not been for two crucial pieces of information passed from Franklin's lab at King's College in London to Watson and Crick's at Cambridge, without her knowing it. The first, a clear photo of the structure of DNA calibrated and captured by Franklin. The second, an internally circulated report that recapped the results of her recent work. Watson and Crick had already made some headway into the structure of DNA, but they had gotten the water content and the location of the phosphate sugars wrong. Without Franklin's data, they wouldn't have had the essential pieces they needed to solve the puzzle. Franklin eventually would have come to the same conclusion as Watson and Crick. The helix, the base pairs, the direction of the phosphate chains. Some say, had her work not been shared. Quote, all her life, Rosalind knew exactly where she was going, her mother recalled. Once her mind latched into something, she was all in. While Franklin was studying at Cambridge, her father complained that she felt about science as she should about religion. She held her ground. Quote, you frequently state that I have developed a completely one-sided outlook and look at everything and think of everything in terms of science, she replied in a letter. Obviously, my method of thought and reasoning is influenced by a scientific training. If that were not so, my scientific training will have been a waste and a failure. Science and everyday life cannot and should not be separated. I'm going to skip ahead in this kind of long entry to get to the part where they steal her work. So here we go. At King's College in London, she took over the study of DNA originally initiated by an interdisciplinary team that had set it aside for the better part of a year. The goal was to figure out DNA's molecular structure. To do so, Franklin lined up DNA fibers, bundled them together, and x-rayed the carefully prepared samples in 75% humidity and 95% humidity. At 95%, the molecules elongated, which Franklin called DNA's B form. The pictures of DNA in this state looked like the lines of an X blinking in and out of focus, the sign of DNA's helical structure, though she didn't yet know it. At King's College, Franklin didn't have any formal collaborators. The most obvious choice would have been Maurice Wilkins, also there, but an early misunderstanding about her role turned the colleagues into adversaries. Their relationship had consequences for Franklin when Wilkins, complaining to his colleague about Watson pulled out her beautiful B-form photo and shared it with the Americans working at Cambridge without her approval. The photograph taken by Franklin was a major revelation for Watson, who had been working from muddy images that were a mix of DNA's dry and wet forms. Franklin's clear image of its wet form changed the way Watson and Crick understood DNA. Their next breakthrough also came thanks to Franklin, and again without her knowledge. In 1952, Franklin was asked to summarize her previous year's work for a government committee. Max Perutz gave her summary to Watson and Crick. The paper was not marked confidential, but the report also wasn't intended for any eyes outside the committee. The report gave the pair from Cambridge crucial information about the dry and wet forms of DNA. Combined with their own research, Franklin's pieces were enough for Watson and Crick to form a solid understanding of DNA's structure. Announcing their discovery in Nature that DNA was a helical ladder with one side going up and the other going down, they claimed the prize for finding the solution without revealing Franklin's part in their discovery. She got scooped by the Cambridge team. She left. She felt the environment wasn't good for her, and many of her colleagues agreed. As the discoverers were crowned, Franklin transferred to Birkbeck College and away from DNA research, as was stipulated in her transfer agreement. Despite problems with Watson, Franklin became good friends with Crick and his wife, who was French. In her last year alive, her work got a moment of public recognition. For the 1958 Brussels World's Fair, she constructed a massive 6-foot-tall display of the tobacco mosaic virus, a pathogen that affects hundreds of different plants. Word of her essential part in the discovery of DNA did not get out until Watson himself spilled it. Since then, she's become the subject of several biographies and a poster child for those who didn't receive the credit they deserved. Franklin, who was always deeply invested in data and facts, would have been happy to know that so many people care about her concrete contributions. So that's Rosalind Franklin. Next time you think about DNA, don't just think about Watson and Crick. Remember her too. Have a great day.